Good morning. Welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. All who come here in the spirit of goodwill are welcome. It's good to gather this morning in person and on Zoom. We acknowledge that this is the traditional territory of the Lummi and Nooksack peoples. Their presence is imbued in these mountains, valleys, waterways, and shorelines. May we nurture our relationship with our Coast Salish neighbors and this land and the shared responsibilities where we all reside today. Our minister, Reverend Paul Beckel, continues on his sabbatical through the end of April. Our sabbatical minister, Reverend Dr. Barbara Wells Tenhove, invites us to participate in a unique service today. One that gives the opportunity to ask a question and learn together. You may have noticed or gotten, as you entered, an index card. Did you all get one? Great. And a pen, and there are pens in the pews as well. And if you're joining us from home, the chat box can be your virtual index card. And these are for that opportunity to ask a question. If you have a theological, spiritual, or church-based question, please write it on this index card and write it legibly because we want to be able to read it. And you'll have a goodly amount of time to ponder and let your questions arise. I will give a heads up before we ask to collect the cards, and we'll just ask you to raise a hand and they'll be collected, and then they'll be addressed by Barbara. So now we will do our prelude.
Well, thanks, Andrea, and thanks, Sue, and thanks to all of you. Am I on here, friends? No? Yes? No? Yes? They say back there, Jocko, now I'm on? Yes, see? I didn't think I was. Okay, let's start again. Good morning, everyone. You know, we did go back in time or forward in time today, so, starting over seems appropriate, doesn't it? Well, I'm Barbara Wells Tenhove, as Sue told you, and until, I'm your sabbatical minister until Paul Beckel returns. Some of you may recall that he left his lovely hat when he went away from us, promising to return, and I have been asked to invite all of us next Sunday to wear a hat to church. And if you're at home on Zoom, wear one at home on Zoom. I was not told why. It's a great mystery. So, but wear your hat. Well, as I'm sure all of you know, just yesterday, Washington State rescinded the mask mandate, making masks optional for most places and activities. Now, this came about because the disease is not rampaging through our communities as it once did. It's good news, even as it can seem a little scary to move in this new direction. The BUF leadership wisely decided to give the loosening of the mask guidelines 2 weeks before we change things here at church. So while we know some of us are eager to take off our masks, we're asking everyone to wait until March 27th. So this Sunday and next Sunday, masks on. March 27th, masks optional. On that Sunday, assuming nothing changes for the worse, you can choose not to wear a mask here at BUF. And here's the really good news. We are going to have a modified but real coffee hour downstairs in the social hall. Woo-hoo! This comes almost exactly 2 years since the church shut its doors, and it's been a very long 2 years. And though I'll be talking about it at length on March 27th, I want to acknowledge that anniversary today. To quote a very famous song, "What a long, strange trip it's been." So take a look around you. We're still here. We're still here. And as your sabbatical minister, I'm still here, at least for another 7 Sundays. And today, in that sabbatical minister role, I'm inviting you to stump the chump with questions that I will answer from my heart and my head on the spot in what I call a question box sermon. Asking questions is how we learn about ourselves and the world around us. And your questions that I will attempt to answer should be, as Sue said, related to theology, spirituality, and the church. No, I will not tell you about my favorite pets or anything about my Dutch last name. You have to ask Jocko about that. And yeah, I'm used to doing this with him for all the years we did co-ministry, so what will I say in his absence? I can't answer all the questions that are likely to emerge, but I will, with the help of the celebrants, answer some of them. So as you ponder your questions and write them on cards you were given or in the Zoom chat, let's sing together a wonderful song full of questions. I know there's some choir members out there who are going to help on this because it's got 4 different parts. We're going to sing through each line twice, and then when we get back to the beginning, you can pick one to sing. If you don't want to remember all of them, just pick one. So here we go. Where do we come from? It's 1003. Please rise in body or spirit, and join us from home as well. So here we go. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we? Now the second one. Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where? Now pick one you like to sing. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where let's all sing mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a myth. One more time. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery.
So, remember when you were thirsty to learn about something before Siri and Google? When there were those books called encyclopedias? I grew up with a set called the Book of Knowledge. You know it? Cool. One of its special qualities was that it was more than dry information. And besides the pictures, each book always had wonder questions. Why is the sky blue? Because wonder is where knowledge begins. And each of us brings unique wonder and life experience to the table. What will be your questions that I wouldn't even think to ask? What can we discover together that might never occur to us alone? We will see. So I'm going to dedicate the lighting of our flaming chalice today to tending a sense of wonder. The wonder that moves us to open to life, mystery, and one another across every country and culture. And now please join me in saying our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant. And now the Phoenix Ensemble is going to sing Anthem, It Takes a Whole Village.
Papa's out in the field, Mama's down at the well, Grandma's away at the market with manioc to sell.
My neighbor is watching the children. They're playing out on the path. An old man comes by and tells them a story, always makes them laugh. And he says, when you go down by that river, you better watch out for those crocodiles. You see, in Africa, the old saying goes, it takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole village to raise a child.
The world is a village now, and it isn't very large. It's a struggle for survival, families working so hard.
Who is watching the children? or glued to their own cell phones, and helping them to understand everything they see. Who's going to sit down with them and listen for a while? You see, in Africa, the old saying goes, it takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole village to raise a child. Thank you, Phoenix Ensemble. So this would be a good time to sort of finish up your writing or get close to it. And if you have a card ready, you can put a hand up and we'll collect the first round. But there's still some time, so this is just that reminder. Okay. And David is going to come up.
Good morning. Why do I pledge? When I first came to BUF, the Circle Round song got me. For the children of our children, keep the circle whole. My eyes would tear up, my voice would choke up. I do believe, the future of our children and grandchildren is in danger. And I believe the circle is not whole and needs to be opened. But at BUF, we are changing. In the Black Lives Matter team this year, one of our challenges is, how can we work for an equitable, inclusive, and thriving democracy? So, we're meeting with BIPOC elected representatives in Whatcom County. The questions we ask are, what do you want to do and how can we help? On some BUF teams, we're using talking circles. Speaking in turn around a circle opens space for everyone to share. I want to acknowledge our indebtedness to Native American teachers. We're trying to listen without thinking about how we are going to respond. We're trying to speak from our own experiences and from our hearts as we talk about difficult issues. Guided by the accountability team, we're also learning to be accountable in dismantling racism and building beloved community. Across BUF, teams are naming strengths and weaknesses and beginning to set goals. In the process, we can listen to criticism, acknowledge mistakes, and make corrections. And on a personal note, through BUF and beginning with Beloved Conversations, excuse me, Jamie and I have been learning to talk with each other more honestly about our frailties. As a UU congregation, democratic governance is one of our fundamental spiritual principles. I believe at BUF we are beginning to create a spiritually grounded, radically inclusive, and accountable democracy. Not perfect, but for the sake of our children and grandchildren. Please join me in pledging support for all our important work together. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. So I want to lead you in a special kind of prayer that I learned a long time ago from Mark Bellatini, who's considered one of our greatest Unitarian Universalist ministers, particularly of worship. I'm told I don't have a mic going here, friends? Yes? No? Okay. Okay, there we go. Hello. Okay, well, I guess we're using this mic. And I can't reach it. There we go. So I'm going to take you through a particular kind of prayer that I learned a long time ago from Mark Bellatini, who is considered one of the great teachers of worship in our Unitarian Universalist communities. And there will come a moment in the prayer where you will be asked, if you choose, to speak a name into the gathered embrace of this community. And I want to assure you that this is not designed to be a call out a name so others can hear it. You can whisper it, you can say it out loud. It also doesn't matter if you say it at the same time as someone else is saying their name. We're in essence creating a tapestry or a weaving of these names into the ether. But before I begin the prayer, I would like to light a candle first for the ongoing situation in Ukraine and the incredible fear that so many of us have that we are heading ever more close to a war. So thank you, Sue, for lighting. So I invite you now to join with me, if you choose, in the spirit of prayer. Gracious One, whom we call by many names, on this day when the sun is shining through the clouds and we are gathered here and afar, when we sense the opening of spring while fearing the uncertainty that is always around us. Let us pray for hope and courage, knowing that they can be hard to find, but also knowing that when we gather in this beloved community and feel the warm embrace of all who are here, we know we are not alone. For many of us today, there are blessings, gifts in our hearts that we are happy for, people that are glowing, babies that are born, wonderful opportunities. If you or someone you know is celebrating a joy, is feeling a blessing, is acknowledging a hope, I invite you first to call their name, perhaps it is your name, into your heart. and then into your mind. And if you choose to speak those names into this sacred space now. May the love that we know is present here and all around us hold these blessings and spread them, carrying the gifts far beyond this place. But we also know that there is heartbreak, there is loss, there is war, there is struggle, there is death. If someone in your life is hurting, if someone has died, if you are concerned, I invite you first to call into your heart the face of that person or persons. And then into your mind. And if you choose to speak those names into this sacred space now. All of these names and the names of those unknown to us, may they be held in this sacred space. And let us pray that hope and healing come to all, and that we will have the courage to offer ourselves to this world from a place of love and hope. And as we breathe in and breathe out, breathe in, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And when I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Amen, and blessed be. Now I'd like to invite Elizabeth Maynard to come forward and share with us.
Well, this feels weird and so strange to take off my mask. Thank you, everybody, for welcoming me here today. My name is Elizabeth Maynard, and I'm the director at Bellingham Child Care and Learning Center. And while many spoke already about the world today and how it impacts our children, that is why I'm so moved to be here and hopefully not cry, because that's what I'm really well known for, to talk about the importance of Bellingham Child Care. First and most importantly, it welcomes all children and families regardless of their financial background or their abilities. We offer a tuition assistance for families that just barely miss that cutoff and can't afford care from the state. That helps a lot of our middle-class families. We also have a low-income program that's for ECAP children, and that really supports the parents by having a lot more conferences and just getting to know their in-depth stories. But what really stole my heart about Bellingham Childcare is that when I walked in as a student 11 years ago going to Western, I felt so safe as an adult. I felt comfortable. The children were welcoming. The adults were singing songs. I could be silly, and there was no judgment. We were gardening, we were baking, we were telling funny stories, and that meant a lot to me. Growing up in a single parent household where my grandparents were my caregivers, that held true meaning of continuing that on for all of the children that don't have that opportunity daily, that their parents have to work, rightfully so, and they deserve a space to go to where they feel at home. Their parents feel that they can connect and hold the hands of the teachers, share scary things that are happening with them, and know that there's no judgment, that we're here, life is scary, but we're gonna walk alongside them. And the most meaningful story that I could share with you is about a little boy, we'll call him Brennan. He joined BCLC in 2013, it was July. We never met him, his grandparents got custody of him, and he was eager and happy to play and ready to go. He joined the monkey classroom, and I got to be his teacher. After weeks going by, he so excited, he would zoom around every day, he would get a little itchy in different clothes and kind of do circles sometimes. And his grandparents pulled me aside and just said, you know, we just took him to the doctor and found out that we got care of him because he was born addicted to drugs and was really neglected and needing to be taken away from the two people that he knew. And he was 2. After many doctor's appointments, they found out that sometimes he felt like he just wanted to itch out of his body. And that's frustrating as a little being. So the parents, or the grandparents, took him to all the doctor's appointments, communicated his needs to the teachers, and the teachers were there to support him and understand where he was coming from, what big emotions he was feeling, especially the day the grandparents shared that he had his very first visit with his dad. And that visit didn't go as planned. The car broke down. The child was left for 4 hours in a soiled diaper. And he came back angry and so mad to be at school, so mad. But the grandparents had to go to work, and the caregivers were there to meet him, hug him, and love him, guide him through Play-Doh activities because squishing that Play-Doh gets that anger out, or doing some really, really interesting yoga helps bring you down in the moment to have a circle time and go to bed and calm your body. And he was there and met with understanding, not judgment, but a safe place. And those parents and guardians who then came, not just Grandpa and Papa, they became his mom and dad, to this day, he's now 10 and has returned back to the center and still has his moments because of medical pieces that are out of his control. But he remembers BCLC being a place where he was safe, it was consistent, it was reliable, and he got to do the things that meant the most to him. And his grandparents felt safe and knew that he was loved. And I can only imagine and wrap my hands around this whole community the best that I can with the amount of spaces that we have. So that is why I became the director, is to be the advocate for children and share that teachers are birth to 5 educators are so important because parents have to work. And that's what we're here for, is to extend the arms and have a safe place. So I can't thank you enough for allowing me to come up here and share about BCLC and the 1-month-olds to 5-year-olds that we get to see daily, and the parents that help us connect and grow them into our future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. And so now the baskets will be passed, and you should see on your screen, if you're watching via Zoom, ways to donate. Please be generous to this very important organization that's serving our youngest, as we listen to Andrea play some beautiful music.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, question number 1 of Question Box. What explanations do you offer when you introduce yourself as a UU minister?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, the first thing I might say is my name is Barbara. That's usually a good way to introduce oneself.
Can you explain the Dutch part of your last
I
name?
won't explain the Dutch part of my last name. Well, I will say that I am a Unitarian because I believe that at the heart of our faith is a oneness that holds all creation, and that in that oneness is the love, which is our universalist heritage, that says we love from a great place of abundance. And so as a Unitarian Universalist minister, it's my privilege and pleasure to get to serve people who are hungry for a religious life, but who find in narrow creeds and doctrines an inability to express their full selves. And our faith is a place where people can express their full selves. And to be a minister to people who can do that is very challenging. Have you ever sat down with someone who's expressing their full self at full volume? Can be a little intense. But it's a wonderful gift to be able to share questions and answers and challenges and blessings with a gathering, a group of people who commit their lives to each other. Because I guess that's the one other thing I would say is that I believe in the church. We can all be religious in our own way, off by ourselves, and we do, and that's important. But really, being religious means coming together in community, and we need each other. When Jocko was serving the church in Edmonds, Washington, they had this wonderful thing, which he could quote fully, but I can't remember it entirely, but it had a line in there about we need each other, and so we come to this place. And I think that need that we have to be in community is a big piece of what it means to be religious. And I'm grateful to be a minister in that tradition.
What 3 problems did early Unitarians see with traditionally expressed Christian faith?
Oh my goodness.
3 problems.
Oh, 3. Well, good. See, this is why I have Jocko over here. Well, we had problems with 3 things: Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Well, I mean, it's always interesting to sort of talk about the doctrinal heritage of our faith. Because as some of you may recall, I said in one of the sermons I've given since I've been your sabbatical minister, how, it's this sort of peculiarity of Unitarian Universalism that we're a non-doctrinal faith named for 2 doctrines. And the doctrine of Unitarianism, what Unitarianism said was that the idea of the Trinity, that God was Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, was not scriptural. And if you're a student of the Bible, it takes a lot of, tying yourself into knots to really find the Trinity in the Bible. It isn't there. And yet it got to be a part of the tradition of the early Christian church. And we have religious ancestors, Unitarian ancestors, that go back to the first few centuries of Christianity. And our ancestors said, no, Jesus is not very God of very God. Jesus was the Son of God. They believed that, but they didn't think that Jesus was equal to God. And that idea that Jesus was not the same as God led to a humanizing of Jesus over the centuries, to the point where we now believe Jesus was a great religious teacher. My dad used to always say Jesus was a genius in religion the way Mozart was a genius in music. But we don't think of that Jesus was God, unless we think everyone is God, which is a little complicated. So, and then Universalism, which is the other part of our heritage, also has antecedents going back to the early days of the Christian church. Because the idea of hell, it's so appealing to some people. I mean, we've all had our moments, right? I certainly had my moments when I had said to myself, how I wish there were a hell, But it isn't a kind and loving idea. And it isn't. And our religious forebears kept saying, why, if God is so loving, why would God send everyone to hell who didn't believe a certain way or act a certain way or even just hadn't heard of Christianity? And so Universalism is an incredibly radical idea. Is that enough for 3? It's close. Maybe one of the other questions will bring up another one. We'll see.
It will.
It will. Okay, good.
What is the difference between Unitarian and Unity Church?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yes, and I am not a unity expert, and so I will not. I want to say up front that if a friend of mine who was a unity or a Church of Religious Science or one of the New Thought ministers were here, they would have a much better answer to that than I do. But I know we do get mixed up with unity because their name is very like ours. Incidentally, Unification Church sounds a little like us too. But the Unity Church, they have the connection. Maybe I'll look at the connection. The connection between our faith and unity, or the Church of Religious Science, really comes together in transcendentalism. And if you know anything, if you took American history, you know, transcendentalists were, you know, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thoreau and you know, Margaret Fuller and that whole crowd that really looked at the natural world and saw in the natural world the holy and the sense of connection with everything spiritual. So there are people that came out of that time. Like if you were to go to the Unity Church, you would find readings by Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thoreau. And then Swedenborg, who we tend to not look at so much, but they're kind of into Swedenborg, and had kind of a similar view of God in the small things, finding God in nature, in all of the ways that we are in the world. They're a lot more into God language than we are. And I'm a theist, so I don't mind God language, but I will say that you go to a Unity Church and you're going to hear a lot more of God language. But they're also not as into Jesus as some other Christian groups, and I would think that some of the Unity and religious thought folks don't necessarily consider themselves Christian. I think it varies. So, yeah, that's what I got for that.
Okay. Now we're going to go back to hell.
Oh, good. We're going back to hell, in case you were worried.
How would you guide Unitarian Universalists when confronted by those who are completely oriented to fear of hell?
You know, it's such a, boy, this is a really tough one. Let me tell you a little story that I read years ago in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. You know, she's the one who did all the death and dying things. And in one of her books, she said something that was really compelling. She said, in her experience of working with the dying, the only people who were truly afraid to die were those who had completely bought the idea of hell and thought they were going there. And it made them so afraid of death. And I think that that's a real issue when you look at religion and theology, because when it focuses on punishment, we get to that place where, you know, we think if we can kill someone because God will kill them, because they're all going to hell, then it gives us permission to do terrible things. And it has throughout history given people permission to do terrible things to each other. But in the world today, you know, and I've run into people like this, not that often because they tend not to interact with Unitarian Universalist ministers, but every now and then, you know, on an airplane or, you know, whatever. And if someone were to ask me, you know, well, you know, what about Hitler or what? And our colleague, who the late great Forrest Church, whom some of you may have heard of, he's written a lot of books. He was minister of our church in New York City, All Souls in New York City, and he had this great. He talked about how we all come from the same source, and we all share the same destiny. And so, you know, if someone comes to me and says, well, you know, isn't so-and-so going to hell? My response is, we all come from the same source, and we all share the same destiny. And if we believe that, as I do, then hell doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And to somehow, you know, offer this great love, you know, because that's really what universalism is about great love, about love at a powerful theological way. And I just think it's this precious gift we have to offer people. Here, take this love. This love is for you. It's for everybody. Then I also just want to say one thing about throughout my career, I have made it a point. Jocko and I wrote a curriculum. Some of you, I think, took a version of it recently called Articulating Your UU Faith. And one of the things that I think is really important for us UUs is to have some simple things we can say to people. When you have a complex faith, which we do, which is fine, I don't think we want to have a overly simplistic faith. Still, it's helpful to have a few simple things to say, like we all come from the same source and we share the same destiny. I urge you to memorize that. It's a very helpful expression. Okay?
Yes. Does Unitarianism and Buddhism intersect much? How?
Ooh. Yes, and I am a terrible Buddhist. I know that there are. How many of you raise your hand if you practice some form of Buddhism? Yeah, see, and a lot of people do. God bless you. I am terrible at it. I'm just so I need to acknowledge that before I answer this question. There are a lot of Buddhitarians out there,
Buddhitarians.
and well, if you heard of Junitarians, that's another one. There's also, Buddhitarians or Buddhiversalists. Ooh, I like that. That's even better. I think because the nature of Buddhism, which does not rely on a deity. I mean, there are, if you go into certain sects of Buddhism, there are sort of versions of gods and goddesses, but generally the underpinnings of Buddhism are not theistic, which is appealing to a lot of Unitarian Universalists who are also not theistic. So I think that's one connection. Historically, Unitarians and Universalists were among the early religious groups to interact across religious borders. And so I think there is an openness to learning from different world religions that has put us into conversation with Buddhism. One of the most impactful experiences of my life, in fact, where the embracing prayer that I just did for y'all, I learned it at this conference in 1987 with the International Association for Religious Freedom. Any of you ever been to a IARF Congress? Jocko, yeah, Jocko went. He didn't go to that one, though. It was BJ before Jocko. But at that conference, we had people from all over the world, and we were all people for whom the idea of religious freedom was important. And so there were Buddhists, and there were Hindus, and there were Shintos, and there were Christians, and there were Jews, and we were from all over the religious spectrum. And it was really powerful for me at the time. I was 27, homebred UU, hadn't really interacted with people outside of my own tradition very much. And it was fascinating for me to discover that we could cross those borders, at least a little bit. And I do know that a lot of Unitarian Universalists, including a number of our ministerial colleagues, are very keen on being practicing Buddhists. But as I say, I am a terrible Buddhist. So there you go.
Barbara, you have led congregations in lots of different settings. Have you noticed big differences, and have you learned from other congregations anything that might be good for us to know here at BUF?
Okay.
You want to hear that again?
No,
Okay, got it.
Let me start with the first part of that question, which is yes. I grew up, my father was a minister, so as I like to say to people, until I came to BUF, I have never been a layperson. And I'm barely a layperson here. And I'm not and right now I'm not. So the whole experience of church for me has always been as either a minister's family or a minister. So that clouds my view in a way. Every congregation is exactly the same and totally different. And that's the kind of thing, I think Unitarian Universalists, we like to think we're different. And we're really not. In fact,
From each other?
from each other, but also church to church, and even across denominational lines. In many ways, churchgoers, of which those of you who are listening to this are churchgoers, you have more in common, not in terms of your beliefs necessarily, but in terms of how you live and act with the Lutheran and the United Church of Christ member and the Church of Religious Science and the active, the Sangha Buddhist group, than you do with a secular person who's having coffee right now and doesn't think about church. There is a commonality among religious people that leans in toward community, that leans in toward thoughtful questioning, that leans in toward making the world a better place. So that's something we share, all congregations share. But what about BUF? You remind me the most of Jocko and I served a number of congregations separately and then together. In the first congregation that we served as a called duo, we had done an interim in Golden, Colorado, and then we were called to College Park, Maryland. Anyone been to College Park, Maryland? Yay! It's where the University of Maryland is. We had a congregation there called Paint Branch, not brush. A branch is what you put in a glass of bourbon, or it's a creek. Bourbon and branch. No one knows what that is. I'm a Southerner. Okay. So Paint Branch was a congregation of people who worked. A lot of them were at the university, similar to BUF. A lot of them were working in government agencies, less similar to BUF. But there is a quality that I think we had there of acquired quirkiness. There's a sense of I think BUF likes to be quirky, which is fine. I mean, you go to University Church, they are not as quirky as we are. Right? Any of you been to university or East Shore and Bellevue? I was a minister at East Shore. Yeah, it's we are a quirkier community, which is good. I mean, I love quirky.
What do you mean by quirky?
Well, I mean, it's like it's like what do they used to say about pornography? You have to see it to know it. You kind of quirky. It's just quirky. People here they're more artistic, perhaps. The Paint Branch also had a fabulous music program, and I think that is a piece of the BUF experience that not every UU church has. I've been lucky in my career that mostly I've worked in great music programs, but there are plenty of churches, I'm sure some of you have been, where you go, huh? That music is really bad. That is never going to happen here. You might not like it, but it's not going to be bad. I think that's enough. I'm sure there's more, and when I do my lessons from a sabbatical sermon, at the end of the sabbatical, I'll tell you more. I promise.
Okay. I don't know if you feel like you've already addressed this. But
Okay, if I have, we'll pass.
Can you clarify our Unitarian/Universalist identity at BUF?
Well, I know that there's been talk about why isn't BUF BUF? Why don't you have the extra U? And that's a long saga and story, historically and otherwise. A lot of congregations became Unitarian or were Unitarian, and then when Universalists, when we merged in 1961, either didn't take on the Universalist identity or didn't change the name. And there are a lot of churches in the Northwest that still do not have Universalist in their name. It is a mouthful. When I started the Woodinville Unitarian Universalist Church, I remember having a person come up to me and say, "Do you realize that our name has 16 syllables?" It's a lot. And so, adding universalism to the name says something about our theology, and universalism is a very powerful theology, in many ways more powerful and more needed in the world today than Unitarianism. But changing a name is complex. I changed mine, getting back to this strange Dutch name that I have.
You weren't going to talk about
I
that.
know. But I was
It's a
Barbara.
magnet.
I was Barbara Wells for a long, long time, and then I took Jocko's name after we'd already been married 15 years. And names matter, and there are reasons to do it that are important. As the reason I took Jocko's name was meaningful to me. So if we were to add universalism to our name, we'd have to do some homework to make that decision.
Where is God to you during this terrible world crisis, war, refugees, COVID, and hate and racism?
Oh
Where
my.
is God?
Well, God is love. God is just love. And I was taught in seminary, process theology invites us to imagine that God is with us at every crossroads, that God is the nudge that says, do the right thing, love more, move in the direction of hope. And that's where I find God. I have never thought of God as someone who punishes or creates war or makes bad things happen. That isn't what God is to me. That's what God is to a lot of people. But for me, God is found in the interactive, relational, dynamic engagement that we have with each other, with all of life, with the past, with the present, with the future. And if we believe that and hang on to that belief, then God doesn't become that hateful dictator that so many people want God to be.
Given the human tendency for status seeking, ambition, and corruption, How has society at times rejected these tendencies to become moral and egalitarian?
I'm just not going there.
Okay.
I think that's enough.
Well, we've answered all the questions.
Okay. Well, I think I'm looking at the clock, and I'm thinking that that I want to thank all of you for your willingness to ask some hard questions. And I hope that you'll ask them of each other and of Paul when he returns. This is how we learn and grow, and I feel very privileged that I'm the one getting to answer the questions, but each of you would have your own ways of answering. It's powerful medicine to share these questions with each other. So let's conclude by singing a wonderful song that incidentally is a Russian melody, which I think is sort of interesting for us to sing now. But some of us, this is a song a lot of us learned at camp. May your life be as a song resounding with the dawn, to sing awake the light, softly serenade the stars, ever dancing circles in the night. 10:59, sorry, I'm always forgetting to give you the number. Let's rise in body or spirit. It is a round. We're going to listen once, sing it through once, and then we'll go into a round. Okay, so here we go. Let's just listen to the tune. Here we go. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing with the light and softly serenade the stars ever dancing circles in the night. Now we're going to start over here. May your life be as a song. Now you guys come in. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing with the light and softly serenade. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing with the light and softly serenade the stars ever dawn. And one more time, here we go. May your life be as a song. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing with the light and softly serenade the stars ever dancing circles in the night. And please stay standing for the benediction. Look around you, friends. Look at these faces, faces of people you know and don't know, lives that you have experienced and lives you know nothing about. Feel the blessing that comes when we gather in beloved community, being reminded that we are not alone. And so as you go forth on this beautiful day, may you hold tight to the belief that when we circle round for our children and our children's children, our life becomes a song. So let us sing together. If you're new among us, it's hymn 155. We can create something vaguely circly to sing together our closing song.
Shall I extinguish the chalice?
Sorry. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children
I extinguish this flame, but carry the light of love in your hearts. Amen, and blessed be.